Hi there, and welcome to the Grief and Rebirth podcast. I'm your host, author and trauma survivor Irene Weinberg, here to encourage you wherever you are in your healing journey. In each episode, I chat with incredible grief and trauma specialists, healers, mediums, and celebs, as well as remarkable people who have inspiring healing stories to share. If you're looking for a podcast that's both uplifting and inspiring, you've found it. Let us help you find your joy in life. Hi, everyone. I hope this finds each of you so very well. I'm speaking to you from my studio in West Orange, New Jersey, and I'm absolutely delighted to have this opportunity to interview author A.J. Coleman, who has written an inspiring, honest, and heartfelt book about tremendous life challenges he has overcome, titled Keep Those Feet Moving, a widower's 8-step guide to surviving and thriving against all odds. AJ is a certified anti-money laundering specialist and fraud examiner who earned his Bachelor of Science from the University of Florida and his MBA from the University of Arizona. He experienced devastating grief when he lost his 33-year-old wife, Cory, to brain cancer, leaving him alone to raise their 1-year-old daughter, Zoey. He also faced accepting his hearing impairment, learning to deal with anxiety and panic attacks, and recovering from job losses. And through it all, AJ, who will be speaking to us today from Northbrook, Illinois, embraced, accepted, and grew. After he started his Keep Those Feet Moving blog in 2013 to share his advice, experiences, and philosophical wisdom with the world, close friends and family members who were all astonished by how AJ was able to stay strong after losing his precious wife, Cory, encouraged him to write his book. In Keep Those Feet Moving, which is AJ's gift to people who are suffering losses and challenges, he offers actions that can be taken to move beyond difficulties and toward happiness. Now happily remarried with a blended family, AJ calls himself a grief resilience mentor because he focuses on helping others overcome challenges. I'm looking forward to talking with AJ about coping with the loss of someone you love, the steps to success as a single parent, how to bounce back from job loss, finding happiness no matter what obstacles are in the way, and more. This is surely going to be an honest, inspiring, and heartfelt interview with a remarkable man. Hey, AJ.
Hey,
a heartfelt welcome to Grief and Rebirth podcast.
Thank you. Great to be here.
It's great to have you. It truly is. And so what I want to do is start by having everybody get to know you. So let's talk about AJ as a child who was frequently bullied for your hearing impairment, which is terrible. How did you overcome that bullying and the social challenges and not let them define you, which so many kids get so many complexes and all that when they're bullied? How old were you when all of this started? And how did you handle that?
I was 3 years old.
Oh, wow.
When I was diagnosed. My parents noticed that I wasn't responding as a typical 3-year-old would be, from listening to different sounds and responding. And I think it got to the point where they said, we need to do something. And I had a bunch of ear infections. They took me to the doctor, and that's when they discovered that there was a hearing impairment. Now, in the late 70s, there wasn't a whole lot of education for not only for parents, but also for people who were impacted like myself on what is a hearing impairment? How do you overcome that? How do you take and make certain amends and try to find accommodations that work best for you? And it was challenging at first. When you're that young, you really don't see the difference between other kids because you parallel play. But once you go into grade school, and our grade school had a whole section just for students who were deaf. And
wow. So now you're stigmatized also.
Yep. And I, was told and said, well, you're in the wrong group. And I was confused because I can hear somewhat with hearing aids, but I couldn't hear like the average regular person. So it was confusing. And at times where I learned very quickly to compensate for my hearing loss through reading lips, where I can read lips from across the room, from afar, and really interpret what somebody's saying. And I can interact that way and almost prepare myself. But when I was in grade school, at times it was still different, right? I mean, most kids today didn't see somebody with a hearing impairment. They saw people wearing glasses. So that was a different type of acceptance. And it was sort of ridiculed for not being able to hear, having to ask clarifying questions, and sometimes missing exactly what was being said because the teacher was turned to the blackboard, calling my name and asking me a question, and I couldn't respond it quickly. But over the years, I still really never accepted it. And it wasn't until actually I wrote this book, Keep Those Feet Moving, where I've accepted my hearing loss and said, what can I do to make something greater than what I've gone through and how can I help others? And I'm very proud for what I've been able to accomplish. It took about 46 years to get to where I am today, but I wouldn't look back at anything different because it wouldn't have gotten to me to write this book. I will tell you that a lot of people may have assumed or may not have assumed about my hearing loss through growing up, going to college, graduate school. I've always fought to stay in the mainstream environment and really did not seek out accommodations or extra help because I didn't want to be perceived as somebody that was going to fail or couldn't handle it. Instead, I kept going and pushing myself and utilizing the lip reading, utilizing my intellectual knowledge, and just through preparation. And that's what I've been able to come through today. So it's an eye opener.
And look at what you're accomplishing now. And here you are on this podcast and all of that. When
Yes.
you were a kid, did kids call your names and stuff like that? Did you internalize any of that?
A lot. It was more the responses like, what'd you say? And I repeat it again, and they continue to do what? And then you see them kind of laughing, picking up things. Social aspects were challenging as you got into middle school and to high school because perception is everything and appearance is everything. And it took a long time for me to try to find a prom date, to try to go somewhere with somebody in my school. I ended up going to somebody that wasn't in my school because she really had no idea about my disability. And I think people were a little surprised that she accepted.
That's the main thing. The amazing thing about you, though, is that other kids would crawl under a rock and say, well, I can't. But you just, even in that situation, before you knew who you found another way around the obstacle, right? So that's fantastic. So yes. You talk in your book about a life script that you believe is already partially written when we're born. And there are certain stopping points and forks along the road that can be life altering and influence our scripts, which you've lived and so have I. So would you like to tell everybody how you perceive the life script and those forks, the stopping points and forks along the road?
It wasn't until I would say I was in my early 20s when I realized sort of how we are born into this world. If there is some sort of life script, how we're supposed to go through, what we're supposed to go through, and the path. And although there is a purpose for everything, we might not understand why. And it wasn't until my wife passed away that I realized that there are certain points in life that you have to make it a decision as to whether or not you're going to accept what was given to you, or are you going to turn and go a different direction and find ways around? And I believe that's when you can alter the life script just a little bit and how it was presented to you. And going through that process, you start learning a lot about who you are, what you want in life, and where you're going. And that life script may have been handed to you, but it doesn't always have to be spelled out the way it was written. And I do believe today we still have that opportunity to alter it. If we don't like something, we change it.
That's great. And you grow through it. I have the same experience. We have choices. They define our lives, those choices.
Mhm.
And then you also compare losing someone you love with a marathon. So how did losing Cory when you were 33 years old lead you to feel like it was a marathon and lead you towards your life's mission?
But when you lose somebody, everybody's first instinct is to give you advice, to tell you how to grieve, how you need to move forward, or maybe you don't move forward. Sometimes they say, well, you need to be in mourning, and this is how you have to mourn. And I always state, you have to go at your own pace. You run your own marathon race. It doesn't matter how fast, how slow, if you take short steps, long steps, take breaks. The matter is how you get to the finish line that matters most. And a lot of times when we're in grief, we compare ourselves to what others think. And we start trying to act to please what others say instead of what we say. And that's where the marathon becomes, is because people treat it like it's a race. Okay, well, after 6 months, it's time for you to start dating. You're going to spend your entire life as a young man just going through the morning? No. But you have to move at your own pace. And that's what that marathon is. And most people who run the marathon aren't running to break world records. Most people are running to, whether it's an accomplishment for personal, for somebody else, or maybe just even the fact that the thrill of just crossing a finish line of a tough course is thrilling enough. So that's something where I think it's important that people understand, especially in grief, very important to stay within your own marathon race.
It's part of kind of stay in your own lane for your race. And it kind of started to lead you to your soul purpose because of the way you were mind setting already, that you were going to chart your own path to get through this. And you also say that life is like riding a roller coaster. And so please share your why and where principle when it comes to coping with different types of grief and moving forward, which is also an extension of your purpose.
Yeah, depending on who you ask, some people enjoy riding roller coasters at the theme park, go up, down, twist, turn, thrill. Some people ride with their hands up. Some people ride with their hands across their chest. Some people hold on for dear life. And that's kind of what life is about, right? You go up, down, filled with a lot of different twists and turns. But in the end, it's how you come out of that makes the change different. And when we're in a mourning process, very similar to that roller coaster, is we're fixated on that why principle. Why did this happen? Why me? Why not somebody else? Or why did this have to happen today, not any other day? And what happens is we spend a lot of time focusing on that why. To move forward through grief, you focus on the where aspect. Where am I going? Where do I want to get to? Where can I get some additional help from? Some people use this like the why and how am I going to get there? How do I do this? But because keep those feet moving encourages constant motion, we now change from the how to the where. Same concept, but we're going places. And I feel that when people have a sense of direction, they're able to follow it much greater than just sitting there thinking, how do I get there?
Right.
Because where you can see, sometimes how you can. So when you move through those mourning stages, the sooner you get to the where phase, that's when the healing begins.
Right. And you can just start to decide, okay, so what's my next move? What do I have to do? Do I want to stay in this why place? And I would like to submit that there's a podcast I know of very well where they can find suggestions for where they can move to through this podcast and how they can get help. In what ways do you perceive that Cory is now an angel in your and Zoey's life? How old is Zoey now?
We believe in angels depending on your religious, your spirituality, but I do believe that they're out there. And I'll share this story. I was involved in a Reiki type session a couple weeks after Cory had passed away. And we're doing the Reiki session. After about a half hour after the session was ended, the Reiki master sat a little quiet and she said, I don't know what it is about you, but I feel like we weren't the only ones in this room. And at one point during the session, I felt a weird touch on my left hand. And I thought that might have been Cory. So I started believing that there might be something out there that's giving us a sign, that's trying to connect with us. But as I learn and I look for different signs across the border, I do believe that these angels, such as our loved one, they guide us through tough times. They're there when we say, well, how did they survive this? Or how did I, not get fired from the job or something happened? I believe that they're protecting us. And I do believe that they would never put us in harm's way unless we could handle that.
Right.
And that's where I believe the spirituality comes in. You just have to pay attention to the signs and just be gracious for those opportunities.
They are a blessing. How old is Zoey now?
Oh, Zoey is 15 now.
Oh, wow.
So she was 1 year old when her mother passed away. And through the years, I mean, we've done the best to raise her. I didn't have a manual from the hospital. It's the one thing that you leave the hospital, get everything you need, but they don't give you a manual on how to raise a child. But it was different as a single dad for many years. It wasn't as common. And it was a struggle for her as well, because some of the things that mom and daughters like to do, I couldn't do. And if you've ever painted nails on, it's a challenge. And definitely it was not my forte. And we've had to get it professionally done. But even in that aspect, she struggled because I wasn't sitting next to her. It's a different perception when you go with a bonding experience. But I have done everything I can to be the single dad that she needs and to manage a career and ultimately continue to heal through my own grief process.
You're a wonderful role model for her. How have you
Thank you.
handled the tough questions she's asked you about Cory?
A long time ago, I decided I was going to be full transparent with her and just talk to her like she is a normal person that can understand it, use different terms to try to separate. And when I say different terms, I would always refer that her mother had an illness. Because as a child, when you go to the doctor's office and they say you're sick, it's two different things, an illness and a sick. But to a child, it means roughly the same thing. So when they say, hey, I'm sick, she might be thinking that it's like something more serious. So I use the word illness. When it comes to talking about how her mother passed away or what happened, what led to the illness, I told her very upfront, this is what happened with mommy. She wasn't feeling well. She had gotten sick over a lifetime, a couple, through the process. And ultimately, she lived long enough to see you walk, to see you jabber a little bit and talk and whatnot. There's a lot of good memories that we do have together as a family. And I try to institute some of those words of encouragement and just be upfront. And there are times that we get into a little bit of a sticky situation when it comes time to getting a passport for her. And the postal worker says, okay, well, where's the mom? Well, she's deceased. And then they look at her and say, okay, well, where's your mom? And she's like, don't you get it? My mom is dead. Why are you asking me? My dad just told you. So you see some of them, a little bit of tension in the voice. But part of where she's learned is that she does have something special, where she has me here on earth watching over her, and she has her mother watching from her over the heavens. And there are times I've had to use the card. Mommy tells me you need to go to bed now.
Right. And also, now that you have a blended family, that must be really helpful to her also.
It is. I mean, having a blended family, as many people know, is a challenge within itself, from respect, appreciation, and a lot of just the communication is really the key. And it's not easy. And we become blended family because we love and nurture companionship. And we want to be able to be around people who can support us, give us the memories, and do wonderful things.
And have love again. I mean, I also had a blended family with my husband, Saul. So I totally relate to what you're talking about. It is very challenging. So taking that and segueing to what are your 5 steps to success as a single parent? starting with prioritizing your children. Now, you were single raising Zoey for how long before you remarried?
9 years.
9. Oh my. Oh, AJ, you get a medal. So what are your 5 steps to success? You have them in your book as a single parent. I think they'd be very helpful to a lot of people.
Well, I mean, there is no blueprint, right? I mean, but
Right.
there are certain things that we can do to help us navigate through the joys of being a single parent. And I say the joys because it's not all doom and gloom, right? We have the opportunity to be with our children and to be able to be a part of their lives and active. So, one of the best things I can say is just make time available for them. Know that they are the most important to you and let them know that you feel the same way. And there are times where we get caught up with work, life activities, we're too tired to play. I encourage people, forget about that, because one day you're going to miss that. And, my daughter will, just like when I say this over a podcast, but, she's 15 years old and she still loves when I put her to bed every night. And people say, well, why do you still put her to bed? You know what? How many people don't have that opportunity?
Well,
I know.
Right. I'm sorry, Jay, I didn't mean to interrupt, but
Yes,
it reminds me of in my situation the night before the accident. Saul said to me, I'm so lucky and thankful to have you in my life. Had he not said that to me, I would not have had that to cherish when the accident, everything happened. And because of what you've been through, you're probably very mindful that every night you want your daughter to hear, I love you, have a good night.
Mhm.
What that is, because that could be, you hope not, but you never know. That could be the last thing a person is hearing.
That and the fact that she may go out of that phase. And you look back and you say, oh, and these are memories. So definitely make sure that children understand that they are most important to you. The second thing I've always learned is to try to keep a routine. It's easy to stray from a routine based on different needs, different schedules. But what I have learned that if my daughter was going to take a nap at a certain time, I'd make sure we were home well before that, get her ready so she can begin her nap. I wouldn't try to push those buttons because if she's off, I'm off. And as a single parent, that means I'm a sole income provider for us, that I need to be on top of my game and to be able to get my work done and be able to balance when I'm working, when she's napping. And I think that's really critical to have, parents, we're running around and we're trying to get those schedules together. We overcomplicate things. And sometimes the best time to be with the kids is free play, freestyle, run around. Those that know me pretty well know I'm pretty serious. I smile a lot, but very seldom do they see the silly side of me. And I let my daughter see that silly side and chase her, do some funny things, and to keep her giggling because there is no sound that is greater than a child's laugh.
You're so right about that. You're so right about that. Let me ask you also, not only have you overcome so much as a single parent and with your hearing impairment and everything, but you've also had job losses and you bounce back every single time. I mean, I know you lost a job 5 times due to company layoffs and culture toxicity. And I doubt there is a single person listening to this podcast who doesn't know someone or hasn't personally experienced some of this. And people react to that in different ways. What is your secret? How did you mindset to be able to bounce back every time these things happen? They were not fair, probably a lot of times. You're coming up against other people's stuff. So how did you handle that?
Anytime you lose a job, whether it's a downsized layoff, a firing, or you just wake up one day and say, you know what, I just don't want to do this, or it's not the right place for me. And it's scary. Loss
It's
of
very
income,
scary.
loss of structure, what people have perceived of you. But what I've learned is that that particular moment doesn't last forever. And it's okay for a couple of days to think about it, settle down, figure out what you want to do next. And there are opportunities out there. You just have to go get them. And in the book, I shared some of those secrets on how to find a job quickly. And I encourage to go through that because a lot of it's self-discovery. You have to know some of the shortcuts to get there. One of my favorite things that people do when I talk to them, they say, well, I'm looking for a job all day long. And I said, don't. Look for a job at night. Go out with family and friends. Spend time with your children during the daytime, because have you ever noticed that your phone never rings when you're looking for a job? But when you're not looking for the job and you're playing or you're out with family and friends, all of a sudden recruiters call you or the job calls you and you're like, oh my gosh, I got to take this. I don't know where to go, right? That's a good problem to have, right? Make it work for you and understand that just because something like this happened, there's a better opportunity further. And you have to believe in yourself. You have to find what you want in life and your goals and go after it and be vocal, but also rely on those around you to help you with that support. Who do you know? How can you get me into that company, or can you introduce me to somebody? And I think a lot of times when people say, what can we do? Most people, when they're in a job loss, I don't know, introduce me to somebody. But people respond better with clear, concise direction. I need to be introduced to someone, so at this company, can you set up a time? And I find that people are more responsive that way when you give them a direct opportunity, a direct goal that they need to achieve. Mindset wise, when it comes to a job loss, I get it. There's a lot of emotion and rejection, and the job market is very flawed, right? You go through these interviews for hours at a time and not get selected, but yet, how are you supposed to feel good about what you've been through? But I do believe in this. If you think positive, if you work hard, the greater the pain, the closer you are to achieving success. Because when you start really feeling it deep inside, that's when you work a little harder, you try harder, and ultimately you'll be able to celebrate once you land that next role. And most of the time,
you have like 5 times.
Yep. And each time I have achieved a better position. Each job I've achieved greater pay, better flexibility. And sometimes we have a tendency to put a question where there's a period. And that again goes back to the grieving process. Why did I get laid off? Why did I lose my job? Did I join a company that's not the right fit? But when you change that to where can I get my next job? Where can I find something that's better, closer to home, better pay? It starts getting kind of exciting, and you realize your outlook is much clearer.
You can also look at it as, what lessons have I learned from this situation, even though it was unfortunate, but I learned things from it, and I'm going to take those lessons and take that to my next better position, right? I love that you've used healing modalities to overcome trauma, panic attacks, anxiety, and you had guilt about dating once again. So let it rip about all of that. AJ, what did you do to help yourself to get past all of that?
I always said I would never remarry. I would never date. And I was one of those individuals, because of the pain and the loss that I felt, that I would never go through this again. And at the time, Cory and we never really talked about the unknown. Even when she was sick, battling brain cancer, we never talked about the what if, because I really believe that we were going to beat this, despite what the doctors said, despite what medical science tells us on paper. And I never got that, what I deem it, kind of like that reassurance that, hey, if something happens to me, it's okay for you to move on. I've given you my blessing, even though I know she would want that and I would want that for her. When you don't have that from somebody, it makes it much more challenging to go out there into the dating field. And over time, I missed companionship. I missed having some of the adult stimulation. And it was time for me to learn a little bit more. And I did talk to a therapist about how do I let go on that and realize, even though I was really the one that was holding me back, it was just that notion that I just couldn't get out of my head. And it's okay. It's okay to love multiple people. And when you're a widower or widow, you never stop loving your spouse.
True.
And a lot of times people think, well, if you get remarried or you start dating somebody, you're forgetting that other individual, and you're really not. So it takes that therapy, it takes talking to other people who are in your situation, that it's okay to love two people. And that's part of the path that we were on in our life script, that maybe we weren't meant to just be with one person. We were meant to be with the second person. And it's your story too, is that the result of a loss transitioned you to do something with a life purpose.
That's
and that's
right.
helping others.
Now, you've also had panic attacks, anxiety, and trauma. I would imagine, so therapy helped you with those also.
A little bit, right. And I learned that with my anxiety and stress really comes from within, as opposed to dealing with the external factors. When my wife passed away, a lot of people thought I would probably just crumble into defeat, because that's what is expected. I was 33 years old with a little child. Like, what did I know about either?
You're still a kid.
And absolutely. But I knew right from the start that I had to remain strong, not necessarily for me, but also for Zoey. And at the funeral, I did not cry. I stayed emotionless. I stayed focused on what I needed to do to kind of lift everybody, because I knew all the eyes were on me. And the anxiety that I feel today and back then was more so just, what happens to me? If something happens to me, what happens to Zoey? And I've learned to be able to channel the external noise from the internal noise of where stress and anxiety come from. And I would tell you, there are certain days where I have anxiety up the ladder, just because something triggered me internally. But anxiety to me tells me that you're still alive. You still care about something. Doesn't always feel good, but you're alive and you're still looking to see what pathways in life you want to go. You can spend your entire time in that anxiety mode by not going out, drawing the shades closed. Or you can say, I know it doesn't feel good, but I'm still going to go out there. I'm still going to put myself out. And a lot of it's that transition of that mindset.
To quote you, where do I go from here? What do I do? Right?
It's all about
right?
the where. All about the where.
And what would you like to explain to us about our comfort zones and trade-offs?
A lot of times we just get stuck because it's what's easy for us. We're used to the surroundings. We're used to the schedule. But where the trade-offs come in, that's where you grow. And that's where you take those next steps forward. And we can stay in that mourning phase. We can stay and say, I will never do this ever again, because that's part of the why. But the trade-off is like, you know what? I can't accept this. We have one life, and I want to go through my entire life. So when I look back at when I'm 180 years old, I can say I have no regrets, that I have done everything I want to. And that's where the trade-offs are really important, because it gets you moving. And sometimes you make mistakes. That's part of life. It's how you learn from it. And there are times that you find yourself going around in a little bit of a circle, right? Because you keep making the same mistake. But eventually you figure it out. And then you get back on the right path, and you look back with a distant memory and say, oh, silly me.
Right. It feels to me like in a lot of ways you take an overview. You don't get into the weeds with what's going on. You're able to kind of lift your view up and make a decision from the higher good of it, right? And I know that you always say that you're your own power source. So I think that's what you're referring to, right? That that power, that motivation to move forward comes from you. You had an amazing spiritual transformation in Israel, which changed your understanding of your life's purpose, your hearing impairment, and all these setbacks that you have experienced. Can you share that with us? It sounds like a very poignant, special time.
So my current wife had gone to Israel a couple of years before and had an amazing time from a spirituality to learning. And she's like, well, you're going to go on the men's trip. And we have a local...
So she gifted it to you? She was like, I want you to do this type of thing? Surprise.
Yeah, she's like, you're going to do this. And she signed me up. And I wasn't really sure. It was a bunch of guys in this men's group that I did not know. And there's about 15 of them. And I wasn't really quite sure. I mean, I was 41 at the time. And I'm like, well, who does this kind of stuff? Who goes to Israel? I got my daughter. But she says, no, you're going. And she drove me to the airport and made sure I got on the plane. And when I had landed in Israel, I really wasn't quite sure what to think, what I was going to feel. And I talk about this in my book. I mean, I'm looking for this transition. Am I trying to find something that's just going to come out of nowhere and say, oh, I get it. But it was a couple of days later, I was hiking up the Masada, and that's a grueling pathway filled with history, and it was hot, and it wasn't even midday, and I've already gone through my 2 glasses of water, pretty much.
And it's a very important historical site.
Yes,
I've been there, yes, in Israel.
It really is, and it's very difficult pathways to get up there, and I kept pushing myself, no matter I thought I was in shape. But as I was going up there, I felt these sensations. I didn't know what it was at the time. And what I learned after reaching to the top was that my faith was being restored after all these years of walking away from my faith, because I was angry about the loss of my wife. I was angry about some of the things that I had to go through in life. And I realized on the Masada, there's no reason for that. I have to put my faith in God and trust him. He will always guide me. And then 2 days later, we went to the hotel, the Western Wall. And this is where we had an opportunity to speak to God, to pray, and to just talk. And I would tell you, going there is very real. It is an unbelievable experience just to be able to talk to God, tell him what your thoughts, your fears, what you want. And at the time, I was in a job that really wasn't going anywhere. I wasn't necessarily happy. It wasn't really the right fit for me. And I prayed at the wall to get a new job. And lo and behold, 2 weeks later, when I came home, not only did I have the interview, but I had another job offer.
Wow.
And that's where I believe in the spirituality of things. And that's where the hotel is all about. It combined with my faith, it combined with everything that I've gone through with my hearing, my disability, going through the opportunities of just seeing a loved one, being a single dad, losing my job, dealing with anxiety, like everything just came together at that day at the hotel. Till this day, I cannot explain what truly happened, but I know there are greater forces at work beyond that we can imagine in this world. You just have to believe and trust.
I mean, I had a similar experience in the accident that happened to me. I think you had a spiritual shift within you.
Yes.
I think you had an awakening within you, and it's such a blessing. I'm happy for you that happened to you, AJ. And what is the AJ message about the importance of healing and continuing to move forward that you'd like to share with our Grief and Rebirth podcast audience?
It's easy to just stay where you are in life because that's what is expected of you. But it doesn't get you anywhere. It's easier to sit and make excuses, question, and ask others. People are going to tell you everything that you want to hear. Some are going to tell you things you don't want to hear. But the only voice that matters is the one coming from within. And only you, no matter how difficult the situation, the setback, the challenge may be, only you can pull yourself through. And the way you do that is by keeping those feet moving. Because at times when we don't know where to go, what to do, we get stuck. As long as those feet are moving, you will always find your way and you will always overcome any obstacle.
That's so brilliant. And I would also like to submit to keep those feet moving towards healers and people who can help you in other ways also, because the more you clean out of your trauma and your pain, the easier it is to listen to that inner voice. That's telling you what's to your highest good, what's for the best for you. And what is the AJ tip for finding joy in life? And my goodness, with what you've been through, what is your tip for finding joy in life?
Really, it's just gratitude. Every day, I feel blessed. Every day I wake up, I feel blessed. I thank God for this opportunity. At night, every day, I thank God for what I've gone through. And people always say, well, we have bad days, we have good days. You know, every day is a good day. That's something my grandfather taught me. That was sort of his motto, and it resonated well. And the secret to finding joy is gratitude. Just being blessed for what you have, not what you don't have. And when you are in mourning, especially with the loss of a loved one, I talk a lot about celebrating their life, because at the end of the day, we are their legacy, and it's our job to keep their legacy alive.
That's beautiful, AJ. You are singing my song. That is beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
You know, one of my favorite quotes, I'm going to show everyone your book here. One of my favorite quotes from your wonderful book, which is called Keep Those Feet Moving, is this, which really resonated with me. There will be critics. There will be unfavorable outcomes. They are part of life. How you respond makes all the difference. And here's another of your quotes that I love. This is your time. It doesn't matter where you started or where you are right now. What matters most is how you take those next steps forward and keep those feet moving. AJ, thank you from my heart for your work as a grief resilience mentor who focuses on helping others to overcome challenges, and for this honest, inspiring, and truly heartfelt interview today. And here's a loving reminder, everyone, that you can see the show notes and all Grief and Rebirth podcast episodes on ireneweinberg.com. And make sure to follow us and like us on social at Irene S. Weinberg on Instagram, Facebook, and wherever you get your podcasts, and including YouTube. As I like to say, to be continued. Many blessings, and bye for now. And thank you so much, AJ. Thank you so much.